page 123. 7. The Steele reports are included in the Page FISA application. As discussed in greater detail below, 4 Steele reports, 2016-080, 2016-94, 2016-095, and 2016-102, were relied on by the FBI to support probable cause in the initial Page FISA application and 3 renewals of that application. Before the receipt of the Steele reports, the FBI did not believe that there were sufficient probable cause to apply for a FISA warrant against page 124. Although the FBI had reason to believe that the Steele reports were opposition research documents commissioned by a law firm and that the candidate's campaign who hired the firm was aware of the Steele reports, there was nothing in the FBI record to show that this was a consideration or subject of debate prior to the use of the Steele information in the initial FISA application targeting page. Moreover, not a single substantive allegation pulled from the Steele reports and used in the initial Page FISA application had been corroborated at the time of the FISA submission, or indeed, to our knowledge, has ever been corroborated by the FBI. The FBI obtained a total of 4 FISC orders targeting Page, which authorized intrusive intelligence surveillance of Page and physical searches of certain items of his property from October 2016 through September 2017. Each of the FISA applications set forth the FBI's basis for believing that Page was knowingly engaged in clandestine intelligence activities on behalf of Russia or knowingly helping others in such activities, and alleged, based in part on the Steele reports, that 1. Page was part of a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between Trump's campaign and the Russian government. Page allegedly met in July 2016 with Igor Sechin, chairman of Russian energy conglomerate Rosneft, and Igor Divyakin, a senior official in the Russian presidential administration. The Kremlin had for years gathered compromising information on Clinton, and Russia had leaked DNC emails to WikiLeaks, an idea concocted by Page and others. As discussed above, in late September 2016, OI Attorney 1 received a copy of a draft request to prepare a FISA application targeting Page from Kleinsmith, OI Attorney 1, informed the office that his subsequent primary responsibility was to wordsmith, in quotes, the application and to gather information regarding sources. In this regard, OI Attorney 1 primarily worked with Case Agent 1 and Kleinsmith. OI Attorney 1 also told the office that he was not aware of the fact that a previous draft application had been prepared by the FBI prior to the receipt of the Steele report, which OGC determined lacked sufficient probable cause to move forward. As discussed above, with respect to the initial application, FBI OGC Unit Chief 1 told the office that she believed that the initial application was a close call but needed more information to meet the probable cause standard. FBI OGC Unit Chief 1 stated that the inclusion of the Steele reporting allowed the FBI to clear the probable cause hurdles in the Page FISA application, and therefore FBI OGC Unit Chief 1 approved the transmission of the request to OI, page 125. FBI OGC Unit Chief 1 informed the office in sum that she had no concerns with the inclusion of the Steele reporting in the Page FISA applications. FBI OGC Unit Chief 1, however, was not aware of what, if any, vetting had been done regarding the allegations prior to the submission of the initial application to the FISC. FBI OGC Unit Chief 1 did have some recall that a lack of vetting of the reports was a concern. Finally, FBI OGC Unit Chief 1 told the office that there was also some concern that Steele had been hired by a law firm on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the DNC to conduct opposition research on Trump. Despite these concerns, the fact that Steele's information was being financed by the DNC and or the Clinton campaign was not included in the affidavit's source description of Steele. The failure to provide this information to the FISC was a major omission, and that the information clearly had the potential to affect the analysis of any bias in Steele's reporting. With respect to the Steele report allegations and the initial FISA application, OI Attorney 1 told the office that he did not think the FBI was initially concerned with corroborating Steele's reporting, although he recalled that at some point, some unknown efforts had been made. Rather than corroborating the allegations of OI Attorney 1, recalled the FBI's primary focus was on Steele's past reliability as an FBI CHS. In his interview with the office, Case Agent 1 also noted that the importance of Steele's past reliability as reason to include Steele's reporting in the FISA application, but also stated in sum that it was essential for the FBI to corroborate the Steele reporting, to include verification of Steele's alleged subsources. To that end, the office directly asked Case Agent 1 whether any of Steele's allegations contained in the initial FISA application had been corroborated. Case Agent 1 stated that, quote, he could not recall anything specific that was fully corroborated. Shockingly, Case Agent 1 told the office that the initial FISA application targeting page was being done in the hope that the returns would self-corroborate. Page 126. In any event, over time, and as discussed in more detail below, the FBI did attempt to investigate, vet, and analyze the Steele reports, but ultimately was not able to confirm or corroborate any of the substantive allegations. Notwithstanding these obvious infirmities, the FBI and the department included these allegations in all 4-page FISA applications, including in 2 applications after Steele's primary subsource, Igor Danchenko, had been identified, interviewed by the FBI, and was not able to provide corroboration for any of the allegations he provided to Steele. To that end, as discussed more fully below, OI Unit Chief 1 was aware that the primary subsource had been identified and interviewed by the FBI. The OI Unit Chief 1 only later learned that serious questions arose from those January 2017 interviews of Danchenko concerning the reliability of the information, as well as apparent contradictions with Steele's reports. In OI Unit Chief 1's opinion, he doubted that NSD would have supported subsequent renewals of the page surveillance had the FBI made it fully aware of the disconnect between Steele's reporting and the FBI's interviews with Danchenko. Number 8. The FBI identifies Steele's primary subsource. During the October 3, 2016 Rome meeting, Steele informed FBI personnel that his reporting was primarily generated by a single subsource, who in turn relied on his own network of subsources to gather information. Steele stated that his primary subsource traveled freely in Russia and appeared to be well connected. Steele, however, would not provide the FBI with the name of his primary subsource. In late December 2016, the FBI determined that Igor Danchenko, a U.S.-based Russian national living in Washington, D.C., was Steele's primary subsource. Notwithstanding this fact, the FBI and the department did not correct in the final 2 FISA applications targeting page their characterization of the primary subsource as being Russian-based. 10. Igor Danchenko. From 2005 through 2016, Danchenko worked as an analyst at the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C., where he focused primarily on Russian and Eurasian geopolitical and economic matters. Danchenko came to be employed at the Brookings after writing to the Brookings Senior Fellows, Brookings Fellow 1, and Brookings Fellows 2, while a student at the University of Louisville. Through that connection, Danchenko was hired as a research assistant to Brookings Fellow 2, page 127. In approximately 2010, Brookings Fellow 1 introduced Danchenko to Christopher Steele. In 2011, Steele retained Danchenko as a contractor for his London-based firm, Orbis Business Intelligence. In his work for Orbis, Danchenko focused primarily on Russian and Eurasian business risk assessment and geopolitical analysis. As discussed above, beginning in June 2016, Steele, using information provided primarily by Danchenko, began to compile and draft the Steele reports containing unsubstantiated allegations of illicit ties between Trump and the Russian government. As discussed in more detail below, from January 17 through October 2020, and as part of its efforts to determine the truth or falsity of specific information in the Steele report, the FBI conducted multiple interviews of Danchenko regarding, among other things, the allegations that he provided to Steele that ultimately formed the core of the Steele reports. During these extensive interviews, Danchenko was unable to provide the FBI with corroborating evidence for any of the substantive allegations contained in the Steele reports. In fact, Danchenko claimed that the Ritz-Carlton allegations he provided to Steele were nothing more than rumor and speculation, and that most of the information he gathered for Steele was the product of casual conversation with people in his social circle, including those parts of the Steele reports used in the page FISA applications. 10. Danchenko's employment at Danchenko Employer 1 and payments by Steele and others. During the course of its investigation, the office gathered evidence related to the unusual process through which Steele paid Danchenko for the course of his work for Orbis. A brief recitation of those facts is included below. As discussed above, Danchenko informed the FBI during his January 2017 interviews that in approximately 2011, he began conducting work for Steele's firm, Orbis Business Intelligence. Danchenko described his work with Steele as a side project in addition to his employment in the United States at a Virginia-based venture capital firm. Page 128. In approximately 2014, Danchenko ceased working for the venture capital firm following the firm's declaration of bankruptcy. According to Danchenko, at the time of its bankruptcy, the firm was in the process of sponsoring Danchenko's visa application to remain in the United States. Following this development, Danchenko reached out to an acquaintance in the United States who operated Danchenko Employer One, a Virginia-based information technology staffing firm. Danchenko stated in sum that he was seeking employment at Danchenko Employer One in order to extend his visa and remain in the United States. Orbis, due to its United Kingdom-based registration, was unable to sponsor Danchenko in furtherance of his work visa application. According to Danchenko, the principal of Danchenko Employer One informed Danchenko that he would hire him on the condition that Danchenko would be compensated by an outside source. In essence, Danchenko Employer One would hire Danchenko to assist with his immigration status but not fund his salary. Danchenko informed Steele about this arrangement, as Steele agreed to pay Danchenko Employer One for the work that Danchenko was conducting on behalf of Orbis. During his January 2017 interviews with the FBI, Danchenko described Danchenko Employer One as a contract vehicle through which Danchenko would be paid for his work on behalf of Orbis. But plainly, Danchenko Employer One was merely a front to allow Danchenko to continue his work on behalf of Orbis, while at the same time allowing him to secure a work visa through alleged employment with a U.S.-based company. As relevant to this investigation, Danchenko Employer One, Executive One, an ethnic Russian, described Danchenko as someone who was boastful, having low credibility, and a person who liked to embellish his purported contacts with the Kremlin. The office's investigation discovered that Orbis, through a separate New Jersey-based company, paid Danchenko Employer One for the work Danchenko performed on behalf of Orbis. In turn, Danchenko Employer One provided Danchenko with a salary funded by Orbis. Page 129. By any measure, this was an extremely odd arrangement given that Danchenko performed no work related to Danchenko Employer One's primary business purpose as a staffing of information technology and engineering contractors. Nevertheless, Danchenko Employer One ultimately sponsored Danchenko's work visa to remain in the United States. In sworn testimony that Steele provided in litigation in the United Kingdom concerning, among other things, the Steele reports, Steele stated that he paid his sources an average retainer between $3,000 and $5,000 a month. Banking and other records also show that from January of 2016 through June of 2021, Danchenko received over $436,000 in wire transfers from European businesses, including from Orbis and other entities affiliated with Orbis. These money transfers were in addition to the money that Orbis sent through Danchenko Employer One to fund Danchenko's salary. C. The prior counter-espionage investigation of Danchenko and the FBI's failure to account for his possible motives and allegiance. Danchenko was a known entity to the FBI in December 2016 when he was identified as Steele's primary subsource. As publicly reported, Danchenko was the subject of an FBI counter-espionage investigation from 2009 to 2011. In late 2008, while employed by the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C., Danchenko engaged two fellow employees, Brookings Researcher 1 and Brookings Researcher 2, at a happy hour about whether one of the employees might be willing or able in the future to provide classified information in exchange for money. Brookings Researcher 1 was a research fellow for an influential foreign policy advisor who was about to enter the Obama administration. According to Brookings Researcher 1, Danchenko believed that he, Brookings Researcher 1, might also enter the Obama administration with the foreign policy advisor and have access to classified information. During this exchange, Danchenko informed Brookings Researcher 1 that he, Danchenko, had access to people who'd be willing to pay money for classified information. Rightly concerned, Brookings Researcher 1 informed a U.S. government contact at an appropriate government agency about this encounter, and the information was subsequently passed on to the FBI. Page 130. When interviewed by the FBI, Brookings Researcher 1 confirmed the details of the interaction with Danchenko. With respect to his interactions with Danchenko at Brookings Researcher 1 described Danchenko as sketchy and suspicious. The second Brookings employee, Brookings Researcher 2, was also interviewed by the FBI. While Brookings Researcher 2 did not specifically recollect the events in question, he did harbor suspicion that Danchenko was connected to Russian intelligence. His suspicions were based in part on the fact that Danchenko had multiple advanced degrees but continued working as a low-level research assistant at Brookings, the implicit assumption being that Brookings unwittingly provided Danchenko access to information of high value to the Russians. Based on the information provided by Brookings Researcher 1, the FBI's Baltimore field office initiated a preliminary espionage investigation into Danchenko. 2 Baltimore field office agents led the investigation into Danchenko, Baltimore Case Agent 1 and Baltimore Case Agent 2. Brian Otten, who was at the time an intelligence analyst as opposed to a supervisory intelligence analyst, provided headquarters and analytical support to the investigation. The FBI converted its investigation of Danchenko into a full investigation after learning that Danchenko had been identified as an associate of 2 other FBI espionage subjects and had previous contact with the Russian embassy and known Russian intelligence officers. In particular, the FBI learned that in September 2006, Danchenko informed one Russian intelligence officer that he had an interest in entering the Russian diplomatic service. 4 days later, the intelligence officer contacted Danchenko and informed him that they could meet that day to work on the documents and then think about future plans. In October 2006, Danchenko contacted the intelligence officer, quote, "so the documents can be placed in the following day's diplomatic mail pouch." As part of its investigation into Danchenko, the FBI also interviewed several people at Georgetown University who knew Danchenko. At the time, Danchenko was attempting to obtain another advanced degree. One person, a U.S. citizen who had recently interned at an intelligence agency, recalled that Danchenko asked her about her knowledge of Russian matters every time he encountered her, page 131. On one occasion, Danchenko inquired about the person's knowledge of a specific Russian military matter. The same person stated, in sum, that Danchenko informed her that he served in the Russian army and worked with rockets, but at the time worked on special matters. Danchenko also told this person that his Russian passport listed him as GRU, which is the Russian Military Intelligence Service. Because of his language skills, based on these encounters, the individual believed that Danchenko was working for a Russian intelligence service. Another Brookings colleague recalled that in 2008, Danchenko informed her that he, Danchenko, had been absent from work at Brookings because he had been in South Ossetia fighting Georgians. Danchenko also bragged to his colleagues about vandalizing the Georgian embassy in Belarus. Further, as part of its espionage investigation, the FBI determined that Danchenko was an associate of 2 FBI counterintelligence subjects. In July 2010, the FBI initiated a FISA request on Danchenko, which was subsequently routed to OI in August 2010. However, the investigation into Danchenko was closed in March 2011 after the FBI incorrectly concluded that Danchenko had left the country. Specifically, the FBI believed that Danchenko and his then-wife had traveled on a one-way ticket to London in September 26, 2010. The office's investigative efforts revealed that, in fact, Danchenko never boarded the flight to London, but unknown to the FBI, continued to reside in the Washington, D.C. area. In 2012, after the counter-espionage investigation of Danchenko had been closed because he was thought to have left the country, Otten exchanged emails with Baltimore Special Agent 2 regarding Danchenko. Specifically, Otten advised Baltimore Special Agent 2 that Danchenko may not have left the United States as initially believed in September 2010. Page 132. FBI Baltimore apparently indicated that it would consider a reopening of the investigation into Danchenko, but never did. Thereafter, Otten contacted WFO, which is the Washington field office, about reopening a case on Danchenko, or alternately attempting to recruit him as a CHS. Otten, however, cautioned the Washington field office to not get played back, meaning the Russian intelligence services could be using Danchenko as a double agent. During his interview with the office, Otten stated that he did not know what, if any, action Washington field office took with respect to this information. Ultimately, the case against Danchenko was never reopened by the FBI division, and no recruitment effort was undertaken by the Washington field office. The special counsel interviewed both Baltimore Special Agent 1 and Baltimore Special Agent 2. Baltimore Special Agent 1 believed that, based on his review of the case file, Danchenko was connected in some manner to Russian intelligence. Baltimore Special Agent 1 believed that Danchenko was hiding in plain sight in the United States while frequently traveling overseas to Europe to be briefed on by Russian intelligence. Baltimore Special Agent 2 stated in sum that the counterintelligence case on Danchenko remained unresolved, and in her opinion, certainly a lot more investigation should have been conducted on Danchenko. Danchenko becomes a paid FBI CHS despite the unresolved counterespionage investigation. Danchenko was interviewed by the FBI in January 2017, following his identification in December 2016 as Steele's primary subsource. The FBI materials reviewed by the office revealed that the primary purpose of the FBI's initial engagement with Danchenko in January 2017 was to recruit him as a paid CHS. If this recruitment was successful, the FBI planned to mine Danchenko for information that was corroborative of the damaging allegations about President-elect Trump in the Steele reports. The FBI initially interviewed Danchenko over the course of 3 days, January 24, 25, and 26, 2017. These interviews were conducted pursuant to a grant of letter immunity provided by the department. The interviews were conducted primarily by Case Agent 1 Ann Otten. Danchenko was represented by counsel during the entirety of the interviews. Page 133. As Otten has stated both in interviews with the office and as a trial witness in the United States v. Danchenko, the game plan for the January 2017 interviews was to have Danchenko identify his sources for the allegations contained in the Steele reports and provide evidence to corroborate the allegations contained in the Steele reports. As Otten testified in Danchenko, during the January 2017 interviews, Danchenko was not able to provide any corroborative evidence related to any substantive allegation contained in the Steele reports, and critically, was unable to corroborate any of the FBI assertions contained in the Carter Page FISA applications. Nevertheless, following the January 2017 interviews, Crossfire Hurricane leadership reached out to the Washington field office to begin the recruitment of Danchenko as an FBI CHS. S.A. Kevin Helson, assigned to counterintelligence squad at Washington field office, was selected to serve as Danchenko's source handler. According to Helson, he was selected because he was a senior agent with knowledge of Russia matters. In early March 2017, Helson prepared the Danchenko source opening documentation. In preparing those documents, Helson incorrectly noted that there was no derogatory information associated with Danchenko and that Danchenko had not been a prior subject of an FBI investigation. This was clearly not true, as there had previously been the unresolved Baltimore FBI counterespionage investigation of Danchenko that was only closed because it was believed he had left the country and returned to Russia. The office was able to determine that Helson became aware of the counterespionage investigation shortly after completing the source opening documentation, but failed to revise the paperwork because of a purported belief that the prior case on Danchenko was based solely on hearsay. In a January 24, 2020 interview with the office, Helson was shown a spreadsheet listing Sentinel, the FBI's case management system, searches that it performed on March 7, 2017, mere days after completing the CHS opening documentation, in which he specifically queried the counterespionage case file on Danchenko. Helson stated that he had no recollection as to why he searched certain serials in that case file, and he advised that he would not have thought Danchenko should be a main subject of that type of espionage case, since Danchenko, in Helson's view, was a foreign national without a security clearance. However, the reason for not locating and documenting the serious derogatory information, the record is clear. The FBI opened Danchenko as a CHS without ever resolving the Baltimore espionage matter or examining the file. Page 134. Despite having seen that Danchenko was identified in the opening serial of a counter-espionage investigation in Baltimore, Helson informed investigators that he was surprised to learn from Otten on March 24, 2017, that Danchenko was indeed the main subject of that counter-espionage case. According to Helson, Otten informed him in sum that Danchenko had a long history with Russian intelligence officers and that he had previously pitched someone for classified information. According to Helson, however, Otten advised him, Helson, that the case against Danchenko was interesting but not a significant matter. Helson informed the office that he had a clear recollection of this conversation with Otten. Notably, Otten did not inform Helson that he had previously assisted in the Baltimore investigation. Once Helson learned of the existence of the counterespionage case against Danchenko, he failed at the time to take even the basic step of conferring with the case agents previously assigned to the matter. In fact, and as discussed in more detail below, Helson did not reach out to the Baltimore Special Agent 2 until May of 2019, when Danchenko was being evaluated by the FBI CHS Validation Management Union, or VMU, and the VMU raised serious concerns about the prior counterespionage case. When the office asked Helson about his reaction to learning that Danchenko pitched a colleague for classified information, Helson stated, quote, "It sounds like something Danchenko would do. That's how Danchenko works." Helson further stated in sum that the fact Danchenko comes off as a Russian spy is describing half the population of Washington, D.C. In his interviews with the office, Helson was essentially dismissive of the prior counterespionage investigation on Danchenko. Despite the unresolved counter-espionage case against Danchenko and Helson's and others' apparent lack of curiosity regarding the matter, the FBI began operating Danchenko as a paid CHS in March 2017. As discussed further below, the FBI and Helson made no further efforts to examine the unresolved espionage case until the VMU exposed the security issues surrounding Danchenko in May of 2019. The VMU examines Danchenko's suitability as a source. The FBI's previous espionage investigation into Danchenko was raised in May 2019 in the context of a Human Source Validation Report, or HSVR, on Danchenko, prepared by the FBI's VMU. The VMU raised several concerns related to Danchenko's past associations, behaviors, and travel history, including the prior and unresolved espionage case. In addition to the information contained in the prior espionage file, including Danchenko's fairly extensive contacts with known and suspected military intelligence officers, the HSVR detailed a February 2018 U.S. Customs and Border, or CBP, inspection of Danchenko when he re-entered the United States after being in the United Kingdom, in which the CBP officer discovered business cards for Russian diplomats residing in England. Page 134. The HSVR also detailed several falsehoods and inconsistencies found in Danchenko's visa applications and immigration documents. One member of the VMU was with extensive prior service as an Army counterintelligence officer in Europe, Headquarters Supervisory Analyst 1, expressed grave concerns about the counterespionage case and was strongly of the opinion that Danchenko was connected to Russian intelligence in some manner. In response to the concerns of Supervisory Analyst 1 and others in the VMU, Helson reached out to Baltimore Special Agent 2 for the first time over 2 years after he initially learned of the counterespionage case against Danchenko. Helson informed the VMU and later the office that Baltimore Special Agent 1 stated in sum that the investigation was premised on hearsay at best. However, when interviewed by the office on July 28, 2020, Baltimore Special Agent 2 expressed disbelief when she first learned that Danchenko had been signed up as an FBI source because, among other things, the FBI had not resolved the prior counter-espionage case. When informed that Helson stated to the VMU that Baltimore Special Agent 2 had characterized the predication of the counter-espionage case as hearsay at best, Baltimore Special Agent 2 was adamant that she would never have characterized Danchenko's direct pitch to Brookings Researcher 1 for classified information as hearsay. To the contrary, Baltimore Special Agent 2 stated that the information came directly from the individual who was the target of the pitch for classified information. In 2 subsequent interviews with the office, Baltimore Special Agent 2 again denied ever telling Helson that the counterespionage case against Danchenko was predicated on hearsay at best. Baltimore Special Agent 2 confirmed to the office that the Danchenko counterespionage case would have continued if he had not left the country, as the FBI mistakenly believed he had. When shown Helson's source opening documentation that contained the no derog entry, Baltimore Special Agent 2 agreed the entry was clearly incorrect. The VMU's recommendations to WFO, or Washington Field Office, and Helson. The HSVR on Danchenko recommended that he be allowed to remain open as a CHS, but recommended that several steps be taken to help mitigate the VMU's substantial concerns about Danchenko. As an initial matter, when asked why the VMU recommended that Danchenko be allowed to remain open given the concerns noted above, several individuals who participated in the HSVR stated that the VMU lacked the institutional ability to do anything more than make recommendations to mitigate CHS issues. Page 36. One supervisor in the VMU noted that it rarely recommended closure of sources out of general fear that the field offices would largely be unreceptive to important recommendations designed to enhance source handling issues if the VMU recommended closure of a source. In addition to the serious concerns about the prior unresolved counterespionage investigation, the VMU also highlighted numerous problematic areas that warranted attention. For example, Danchenko's background and employment history had noted inconsistencies and omissions. His assessed motivation provided information to the FBI had changed. His immigration applications omitted certain derogatory information and contained inconsistencies and falsehoods. And despite his concerns for his personal safety, he traveled frequently to Russia before becoming a CHS. Danchenko also demonstrated knowledge of tradecraft and made contradictory statements, and much of the information he provided appeared to be hearsay that he was unable, despite requests to validate. The VMU recommended several steps to mitigate these areas, such as administrating a polygraph examination, further controls on his reporting, and additional evaluation, but these did not occur. Instead, Helson and WFO ignored nearly all of the VMU's recommendations and continued to operate Danchenko as a CHS until WFO, or Washington Field Office, was ordered to close Danchenko in October 2020. In total, the FBI said paid Danchenko approximately $220,000 during the 3.5 years that Danchenko was a CHS. FBI counterintelligence personnel at WFO and in the counterintelligence division at the FBI headquarters opposed efforts to close Danchenko and delayed doing so. Moreover, the office learned that the FBI proposed making continued future payments to Danchenko, totaling more than $300,000, while the office was actively investigating this matter, which would have been in addition to the $220,000 he had already received.